Hello, everybody, and welcome to the 96th installment of Uncut History, our irregular live show, sometimes hosted here on Readout Productions, a bastion for historical preservation on the Tubu and on the X, formerly known as Twitter, and on the Hate Book, and we're on Rumble as well. We're simulcasting to Rumble, and then Instagram exists, and I forget to use Instagram. How's everybody doing tonight? Oh man. Sorry I was late there. Yeah, I was supposed to start the stream at 6:30, but I don't know. I don't know what caused the delay. Let's see who we have tuning in tonight. So Ken has joined us. Last live was full of Texans. It was, yes. The last time we were going live, we were talking about the Texas Revolution. We actually did 2 live streams, 2 virtual battle walks, diving into the Siege of the Alamo. We did it on its 190th anniversary back in early March. And then we talked about the 190th anniversary for the Battle of San Jacinto. Those were some very fun streams, especially San Jacinto. I really enjoyed doing that one. And I being a humble collector, have since been plotting. We've been plotting a trip. It won't happen in 2026, but we're plotting something. It would require me to go on a plane, though. Just like how I've been plotting to want to go out to the battlefield we're going to talk about today, but even trying to go on a plane is just, it's too much of a headache. You might as well just drive. I might as well just drive from Pennsylvania to Montana, to be honest, and enjoy the sights and sounds. But then that requires me to get a lot of money for a lot of gas so I could pay the gas, because gas is really expensive right now. Wah. So in the 96th installment, we are talking about the Battle of Little Bighorn. Today is indeed the 150th anniversary of the Battle of Little Bighorn. And if you did not know it was, don't worry. It's actually a 2-day battle. Many people do not know that the Battle of Little Bighorn was actually waged for 2 days. It bled into June 26th. So if you're just now being reminded, oh, it is the 150th of this monumental fight of the American Indian Wars, well, you'll have tomorrow to commemorate it as well. And we have a new name here, Matt DeWaro. Thank you for joining us tonight. Hi from Australia, all the way from Australia. Big Custer fan. Good job on doing this today. Have to get to work now. Cheers. All right. Very good. If you're able to play the replay once you get back from work, I highly recommend you do so. Hopefully I make you proud. Just start your replay like 10 minutes in. I just advise start 10 minutes in. Yes, the negative waves. I don't want to be, no, I'm not going to be like Moriarty. I'm not faking a negative wave. I'm only faking a positive waves. I'm going to knock it off with the negative waves. I promise, Ken. Even though it's going to like storm here at any moment. Like the National Weather Service alarms have been going off off the hook the past hour. The skies are sunny right now, which is alarming me because, again, the alarms have been going off the TV here in southwestern PA for a while. So the stream may get knocked off the air. Alrighty. I think there was like another name. Oh, Johnny Utah. Reno and Benteen could have saved him if they rode over there as soon as the rider gave them the message from Custer, but they whipped out a bunch of pussies. I probably shouldn't have read that whole one. Oh, well. Thank you for joining us today, Johnny Utah. You have strong opinions of the Battle of Little Bighorn, I can see. Now, I'm going to be upfront. I am no expert on the Battle of Little Bighorn, no expert on the Great Sioux War of 1876, and I'm not much of an expert on anything related to beyond, I just want to say, beyond, when we expand beyond Eastern woodland culture, which is what I'm more affiliated with, I'm more involved with when I do my research on stuff like the French and Indian War, American Revolution, Northwest War, War of 1812. That's like the Indian wars I'm more familiar with. When we get to the plains, I only know the basics. So I've kind of tried to jam my brain with some interesting facts today that I want to share with you guys. So this is not going to be as in depth as I would normally do my virtual battle walks, but I think it's going to be an interesting talk nevertheless, because I'm going to talk about some of the broad strokes of what led up to the Battle of Little Bighorn, because I don't think many Americans realize what actually spurred this event on. And then when we actually get to the battle, I have an eyewitness testimony I want to read you guys. It's actually from a Native perspective. And then we're going to talk about free soldiers that were from my neck of the woods, southwestern Pennsylvania, who actually found themselves in the thick of the fight 150 years ago. So that's how I'm like, if I can't give a good top down perspective, then I'm going to go with my Pennsylvania perspective. Johnny Utah's, I've read tons of accounts of the Battle of the Years, and I'm sure you're going to keep me in line with every mispronunciation I make. It is Redoubt Productions. I am a Yinzer. I can barely speak the English language. So when we try to get into any other languages, God help us all trying to watch this. With that out of the way, let's dive in to the Battle of Little Bighorn. Alrighty. So let's just really hammer in a bit about when we talk about the American Indian Wars, because that's such a vague term. The American Indian Wars, I think the average American, their idea comes up with, we're dealing with Plains Indians fighting Custer's cavalry, like what we're going to talk about tonight. But I mean, to be honest, what's going to happen on June 25th, 1876 is broadly just a continuation of what's been going on for several centuries now in North America. And that is, as what was originally European colonies later becomes the United States of America, expands farther across North America, the more and more various indigenous nations, they're going to shrink in size and scale. So there are countless wars between different colonies, later different countries, and different tribes. You could go back as early as 1492 when Columbus lands in the West Indies, if you want to really be technical when this all starts. We could talk about King Philip's War, which is still the costliest war per capita in American history, in North American history. And Dogface, who is a enthusiast, a researcher, living historian for the King Philip's War. He is sadly not able to attend the live stream tonight, but I'm sure he'll be tuned into that replay. And again, Dogface, if you're listening to the replay, just skip about 10 minutes once you start. Just for my own sake, I just recommend you skip about 10 minutes into the stream. It's okay. It's okay. Then we could jump to the 18th century, where we got Pontiac's War, which is really one of the first accounts of widespread confederacy amongst the different tribes. It was very loose, but there was uniformity, a common cause, these different tribes of different cultures, different languages coming together with a common goal of deterring westward expansion of the European colonists. Then we could jump into Tecumseh's War, which I'm just using as a fancy term for the Northwest feeder of the War of 1812, which, by the way, we got several videos all about Tecumseh and his involvement in the War of 1812, all that's happening around what is now modern day Ohio and, on Lake Erie. Go check out our videos on Fort Meigs. You can even jump back to the Northwest War and learn about the Battle of Fallen Timbers that happened in the same neck of the woods. There's my shill for my content on the War of 1812. Got to shill the War of 1812 when you can, because very few people want to talk about it. Journey with Murphy likes talking about it, thankfully. Seminole Wars down Florida. The UT Wars are going to happen in the 1850s. The Colorado War of 1864. It just keeps going on. We're kind of shifting the proverbial goalpost farther west as the United States of America keeps growing. Now, the United States begins to walk over the Mississippi River in 1804 and makes its first formal contact with Plains Indian tribes. But in 1869, they're going to go from walking to riding by rail across the plains, across the Rocky Mountains, and to the Pacific coast. And that's when the Transcontinental Railroad is finished, which, by the way, that was a policy of the Lincoln administration. Yeah, the Transcontinental Railroad has ties to the American Civil War. It was an idea Lincoln kept pushing for that railroad to be built in spite of all what was happening on the East Coast and around the Mississippi River. He wanted to unify the continent, unify the Union. So he didn't get to live to see it, but in 1869, the Grant administration would get to live to see it completed. And really, that really sets up the stage for what we're about to get into now, into the 1860s and 1870s, particularly between the United States of America, the Sioux Nation, as well as elements of Cheyenne, Arapaho, and I know there's a few other tribes I'm missing. I unfortunately don't have time to mention them all, but that kind of cluster, that group there. Treaty of Fort Laramie, 1868. This is really what takes us from going from broad strokes to now we're going down to looking at the local scale. What's happening in what is now the states of North and South Dakota, Nebraska, Colorado, Wyoming, and Montana. And all this is really what's starting to pave the road to Custer's Last Stand. This was really an amendment to an earlier treaty, which was made between representatives of the Lakota Sioux, as well as a few other groups of people with the United States of America. And what the Treaty of Fort Laramie does is essentially establish a Great Sioux Reservation, which is essentially the center part of South Dakota today. But it also amends to allow several regions for hunting grounds. So you can see the Great Sioux Reservations in the gray on this map, and you can see in that gold, those were the hunting grounds, which the United States agreed they would respect, and that by doing so, the U.S. would also provide food and clothing to those that are going to be living on the reservation. They would deter trespassing by U.S. citizens into the Sioux Reservation, and as well as keeping other tribes from crossing over lands the Sioux were claiming. And it's important to remember that the Treaty of Fort Laramie is not being set up in the vacuum. So, it's bad enough that we already talk about these arbitrary lines being drawn, but keep in mind, this is happening with many other tribes with various cultures and various mobility, some more nomadic than others, all living around and on top of the same land that's being divided up by the Treaty of Fort Laramie. So other reservations for other tribes are being established at the same time as the Great Sioux Reservation is. That will be important to what we're talking about later tonight. So Treaty of Fort Laramie is signed. Not every representative of the Sioux Nation nor of the Arapaho are going to sign it. Only a select number of representatives. And the most notable standout of refusing and rejecting the treaty is Sitting Bull and his clan. Basically, his attitude of the whole situation was, I've lived my whole life being able to hunt wherever we can hunt, wherever the buffalo may roam. No, I'm not. I can't sign any of this away. No, I'm going to reject anything you give us. This isn't for sale. And this isn't a matter of I refuse to sell to you. It's like that concept doesn't apply to us. We go where we need to go for resources. I can't predict where I'm going to need the resource. I can't help that a herd of buffalo, bison, other wildlife, or a certain site of game just starts appearing way farther than it should be because everybody's moved in. So I'm going to go where the buffalo roam. So Treaty of Fort Laramie is signed. There's people that oppose it, but initially it seems it's going to be fine. But then, as you probably all are aware, it's about to happen. Very quickly, the United States changed its tune on the initial boundaries. And in particular, it's because people go into the reservation lands. The U.S. does not stop them. They get into the Black Hills, and they start discovering all sorts of valuable minerals, especially gold in damn hills, Custer made a bad decision by not turning around when he saw the massive number of Indians. Custer was reckless. We'll get to that in a moment. So here we are, the Black Hills. Now you'll hear a lot of talk in this time period about the Black Hills being deemed sacred by the Lakota Sioux. Then you're going to hear people also say, well, actually, the Lakota Sioux only settled in this region in the very late 18th century. The Cheyenne were living in this region before then and were driven off by the Lakota Sioux. And you can make the same argument. I'm sure there was a group of people before the Cheyenne that claimed the Black Hills as their own. And it goes on and on farther back in time beyond what we understand as recorded history. So who owns the Black Hills? There's a subject matter I don't want to touch with a brown bess musket. I'm going to keep a brown bess musket length away from that answering that question. But in this situation, the Black Hills were part of the initial Treaty of Fort Laramie. This was kind of put in there as an incentive to get the Lakota Sioux to sign on. Like, don't worry, the Black Hills were protected. And members of the Lakota Sioux, as well as the Dakota Sioux, I should mention as well, your Sioux nations, they view the Black Hills as having some sort of role in the cycle of buffalo hunting. Some say if you look at the outline of the mountains, they look like a buffalo head. Also say that it literally a cycle kind of funnels the buffalo in and out on a seasonal basis. So this was seen as the core of the Sioux Nation's livelihood, of their way of life. So what ends up happening is, initially the United States, hey, there's gold in them hills. And I know I'm being very basic. I know there's a lot more that goes into this, but for the sake of time, I'm kind of being a little facetious here. There be gold in them hills. My brain's having a fart. I apologize. My brain's a little fried right now. Okay, it's back. My brain has returned. So the United States initially offers to buy the Black Hills. Lakota Sioux reject this offer. And this is going to leave the Grant administration to come up with a strategy of how can we get possession of the Black Hills by force. And what it comes down to is it is decided that anybody who is not on the Great Sioux Reservation, so off the hunting grounds in the original reservation boundary, if they're not in that reservation by January 31st, 1876, they will be deemed hostile toward the United States of America. And thereby, it'll necessitate military force to drive them onto the reservation. The Great Sioux Reservation itself is not going to include the Black Hills. That earlier map, I'm not too fond of because it kind of makes it seem like, well, the Black Hills are right there. Well, they really weren't. And as you can see by this later map, it gives you a better idea what's going on here. Also, I should mention this announcement, this ultimatum wasn't like given out like a year in advance, not a half year in advance. It was like only a month in advance, if that the Lakota Sioux and other tribes that were on these hunting grounds in the Black Hills were given this ultimatum. So they had next to no time to react. No sooner they heard the ultimatum had already expired. So, yeah. Yeah, my brain was rebooting, books, and thank you for joining in tonight. How are you doing? How's everybody doing? And if you're tuning in tonight, be sure to consider hitting the like button. If you enjoy getting edumericated through live shows and videos that we produce here in Readout Productions, or if you simply like me, my brain crapping out every 5 minutes, and that gives you amusement, dark black humor every evening before you go to bed, also consider hitting the like button if that's the case. If you're laughing at me, that means you're enjoying yourself. Hit the like button regardless. I appreciate it. The Lakota and our tribes got screwed big time. U.S. government broke the Treaty of Fort Laramie. So early 1876, let's get into the strategy of what's happening. What is the plan? So the United States government strategy to get these hostiles onto the Great Sioux Reservation is that there's going to be free military call-ups set up. And if you're familiar with the American Civil War, you're going to recognize some of these names. Coming from the west, out of Fort Ellis in the Montana Territory, is going to be Colonel John Gibbon. Yes, one-time commander of the Iron Brigade of Gettysburg fame. They'll have about they'll have approximately 450 men, and this is a combination cavalry infantry unit, which is something we don't often speak about. We think the Plains Wars are just straight up cavalry. No, there's a lot of infantry involved as well. You're going to eventually see why you only see cavalry on June 25th, however. They're moving from the west. Then General George Crook, with approximately 1,000 men, are going to move out of the south. You can see that line there coming out of Fort Fetterman, which, by the way, Fort Laramie, Fort Fetterman, they're along an old wagon trail that curved up over the Bighorn Mountains into Montana Territory to the Yellowstone River. It was a major artery for early settlers traveling through. It was shut down in 1868 to through traffic when this was put into as hunting grounds. Those forts, instead of becoming, way stations for the road, now they were supposed to keep people from trespassing and keep the Sioux and Arapaho and elements of the Cheyenne that were living in that region, keep them contained. Well, this is where these campaigns is starting. How did I learn all this? Very good question. And it's a little complicated. I'd love to say I do a lot of reading, and I did do some article reading tonight. Nothing high tech. Honestly, a lot of it today, popping on podcasts. We're very lucky that Jim Hessler of Dan the Man Sickles fame. Yes, the historian for Dan the Man Sickles, the hero of Gettysburg, also happens to be very much an enthusiast on George Armstrong Custer, Custer's Last Stand. He's done a lot of research. I've been listening to various podcasts, usually featuring Jim Hessler throughout today. So the ones I want to mention is Tavern Talk. It was an episode, Tavern Talk, by Addressing Gettysburg. I think it was almost like 2 hours in length, where it was him, Matt Cowrie of Addressing Gettysburg. They hosted a group of regular followers of the Addressing Gettysburg podcast, and they had a 2-hour conversation in a bar about the Battle of Little Bighorn. And it was, bouncing off different people's ideas on the campaign, on decision making. And you know what? Give me 1 second, guys. I'm going to go nab the Tavern Talk link. I meant to have a list, and I'm going to make sure to put it in tomorrow morning, a list of resources I used, because kind of what happens when I do these live streams, I kind of just merge what I've read together. It kind of just merges into my brain, and then I spit out excerpts of it, and I try my best to cite it, but it all melts together. Like, who did that one come from? I know I read it somewhere, so I'll try tomorrow I got the link saved to give a proper bibliography and description below, because there's a lot of interesting stuff with Custer's Last Stand. There we are. I grabbed the companion piece, which I also listened to. I also listened to Matt and Mr. Hessler's companion piece, but the link is right there. I'm popping in the chat right now. So if you want to listen to Tavern Talk, I promise you they're going to be, those two folks on that Tavern Talk are far more informed than I can ever hope to be on the Battle of Little Bighorn. So that's just one source. There's a few other ones I've been listening to, but Jim Hessler has kind of been the informal guiding light for me and listening. Another one I want to shout out. Yeah, we're going to shout out sources about the Battle of Little Bighorn. I'm happy to do it tonight. Another one I recommend listening to, Project Past, through his Distant Drums podcast, has been doing, basically the past month has all been Little Bighorn content. They've been bringing on numerous historians that have hyper focused on different aspects of the Battle of Little Bighorn. The most recent one that they've done was Battlefield Archaeology at Little Bighorn with Dr. Douglas Scott. So there's a whole series now on Project Past of just these interviews with great historians and their different perspectives on the Battle of Little Bighorn. I'm just going to pop the link into Project Past's most recent installment of that series. I recommend you listen to that as well, because like I said, they've posted like a month's worth of content, and it's been phenomenal. But back to my humble little show. There we are. So Gibbons coming from the west, Crook's coming out of Fort Fetterman from the south, and then you're going to have General Alfred Terry's column coming from the east, started at Fort Lincoln and making their way to the west. Now, it seems like there's a really coherent plan going here. It looks like we got a three-pronged strategy that's going to move into where we generally believe that the hostiles are located, those that refuse to go on the reservation, that we're going to be able to just kind of crunch them into a vice and then cart them off to the reservation. Nah, the map makes it look a lot nicer than the actual strategy. It is very vague sometimes. Other times, it's ridiculously detailed to the point that it's impossible to follow all the steps. So you have 3 different command posts, very far apart. And then you have this vast interior. How do you think they're communicating? They're trying with steamboats, at least along parts of the Yellowstone River, but other times it's heavy mountains like the Bighorn Mountains, where part of the battle is going to occur. You're in these mountainous terrains. So trying to coordinate all the 3 of these columns is a nightmare. And I don't think they actually envisioned it. It was more just we got 3 people moving at once. Surely we can't fail. So yeah, it looks pretty on paper, but the actual U.S. strategy is at worst vague, at best overly complicated in certain details. And I'm going to show you an example here in a few moments what I mean. So this here is a transcript of the last written order given by General Terry to what makes up a portion of his column, the 7th U.S. Cavalry Regiment, of course, under command of Lieutenant Colonel George A. Custer. And I'm just going to read it to you and let me know what's your opinion of this order in the comments section. The brigadier general commanding directs that as soon as your regiment can be made ready for the march, you will proceed up the Rosebud in pursuit of the Indians whose trail was discovered by Major Reno a few days since. It is impossible to give you any definitive instructions in regard to this movement, and were it not possible to do so, the department commander places too much confidence in your zeal, energy, and ability to wish to impose upon your precise orders, which might hamper your action when nearly in contact with the enemy. He will, however, indicate to you his own views of what your action should be, and he desires that you should conform to them unless you shall see sufficient reasons for departing from them. He thinks you should proceed up the Rosebud until you ascertain definitely the direction in which the trail above spoken of leads. Should it be found, as it appears almost certain that it will be found, to turn towards the Little Bighorn, he thinks that you should still proceed southward, perhaps as far as the headwaters of the Tonga, and then turn toward the Little Horn, feeling constantly, however, to your left, so as to preclude the escape of the Indians passing around your left flank. And it continues. The column of Colonel Gibbon is now in motion for the mouth of the Bighorn. As soon as it reaches that point, you will cross the Yellowstone and move up at least as far as the forks of the Big and Little Horns. Of course, its future movements must be controlled by circumstances as they arise. But it's hoped that the Indians, if upon the Little Bighorn, may be so nearly enclosed by the two columns that your escape will be impossible. The department commander desires that on your way up the Rosebud, you should thoroughly examine the upper part of Tulloch's Creek, and that you should endeavor to send a scout through to Colonel Gibbon's command. The supply steamer will be pushed up the Bighorn as far as the forks of the river, as found to be navigable for that distance. And the department commander, who will accompany the column of Colonel Gibbon, desires you to report to him there no later than the expiration of the time for which your troops are rationed, unless in the meantime you receive further orders. That's a word salad there. I'm not going to lie to you guys. From the, as somebody who's accustomed to reading orders either from the 1700s and going up through the American Civil War, man, is this a word salad. I mean, I'm a layman here, but I'm trying to be in Custer's shoes right now. It's June. And by the way, I forgot to mention too, January 31st was when the ultimatum went into effect. We just jumped to June. Guys, I want to mention also that these columns have been on the move. Some of them have been moving as early as March. So again, they were trying to be simultaneous. They got off to different times when they started. So again, not the best coordinated attack. Here we are in June with Terry's column coming out of what is now Bismarck, North Dakota. And these are the orders he's given to Custer. And the idea is that we got to make up for lost time. Custer, get running forward. And I should also mention that we're not going to get to talk about today, and it's for the sake of time, there's a whole other battle that happens a week or so before Little Bighorn, where one of these three columns, I could be wrong, I think it's Crook's column, actually gets turned back by the natives. That's the Battle of Rosebud Creek. So keep that in mind. Oh boy. Our colorfully languaged Englishman Starfury has joined us tonight. We are talking about my favorite self-publishers. Let's all ride to the sound of the guns. Fire. Serious levels of cover my ass. There's no filter on Starfury, so I must read Starfury's language as it's supposed to be, but within the reason of the tube U. I swear I might as well be in Charlie Brown in class. All I can hear is the teacher saying, wah, 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 wah. I'm kind of there with you, Starfury. I'm not going to lie. This is gibberish. Excuse my French. I've now turned Starfury into Scottish, apparently. Yeah, 150 years goes to the time now if we're going back from Easter Mountain from Eastern Standard Time to Mountain Time. I would love to tell you I planned it all out like that. But Editor Chan will tell you the truth that I am not that intelligent. I cannot plan things out like that well. More. Okay. More. But the point is, from the little I've read, the plan in this campaign goes from starting with very, very vague to allow the commanders of a lot of breathing room because at the end of the day, they don't know exactly where these hostiles are currently located. We just know they're not on the reservation. So that means they can be anywhere. So it makes sense that you want to allow as much room for your subordinates to operate. But then in the same breath, you have these commanders going into the minutest of detail, contradicting each other. Oh, you know, I'm not saying you have to do this, but you probably should do this. And I'm not saying you have to go on the left flank, but you probably should be focusing on the left flank. You know, I'm going to be honest with you guys from what I've heard about the Little Bighorn. I am not as sour on George Armstrong Custer as most people are. Definitely when you read this letter, because I can only imagine what Custer's response was like. All right, you want me to be in? All right, you're giving me the initiative. Okay, first, what am I doing here? Am I in charge? You in charge? I know you're my commanding officer, Terry, but it's also like you're not the one out here having to go overland. So, plan very vague. Tell the truth, it was non-existent. Yeah, tell the truth, it was non-existent. Ooh, what link? I started straight. I've been in here since about 6:30, so I haven't been anywhere else, by the way. I'm in stream mode, so I don't have access to much else. So June 22nd, Custer will lead the 7th Cavalry moving over the Bighorn Mountains. He's moving in the direction. He's trying to follow his commanding officer's orders as best as possible. Now, contrary to popular belief, Custer did not rush his men over the mountains. He leaves 22nd. He's kind of moving at a slow but steady pace throughout the 23rd and throughout the 24th. It's also important to remember that something just vibrated. I think my phone, or it was something else. I heard something go squeak. So I don't know what that was. We'll just keep going. No thunderstorm yet. No thunderstorm yet. Man, tonight I'm just getting really distracted. I don't know why. So Custer keeps a more consistent pace than most people are led to believe, at least up until the night of June 24th. He does, however, have a group of Indian scouts. Some of them are from the Crow Nation. They're moving into Crow reservation lands. As I mentioned, what is now the Little Bighorn National Monument is surrounded by a Crow reservation today. So you're going to see them helping out the United States forces as they're moving in to try to track down where the Lakota Sioux, the Dakota Sioux, the Arapaho, the Cheyenne, these hostiles, where they're located in this region. They're somewhere on what's deemed to be a Crow reservation, believe it or not. So that's something to keep in mind. I know there's also, was it Arapaho, I think it is. There was the other nation that was affiliated with the United States at this time. They have a few scouts with Custer as well. Well, these Indian scouts of Custer, they report to him the morning of June 25th, a massive encampment, a massive village is located on the west bank of the Little Bighorn River. And Custer initially is like, okay, I can't really see the village. I'm about 15 miles out of this time. What's going on here? And they keep going, no, you got to come now. It's like, we must attack now because they know we're up here. They saw us scouting them. We saw warriors down at the foot of the cliffs. They know we're up here. So they're going to be either coming to attack us or the camp's going to break up and we're going to have to keep hunting them down. So after much convincing, it's at this point Custer decides that he must move the 7th Cavalry as quickly as possible over the last bit of mountains through what they call up to like the Crow's Nest area, which is kind of overlooking what will become the battlefield, and move down into the valley below, the valley of the Little Bighorn. So it's the morning of June 25th that Custer's plan kind of, what his movements, his consistent movements starts speeding up, and where mistakes are going to start being made. Now, another misconception a lot of people have about the battle that's about to happen, this village that the Indian scouts have spotted. Some say it's the largest gathering of its kind on the plains in North America. You'll hear some say as many as maybe it's 10,000 people were gathered down there at once. And this village was almost free, maybe even 7 miles long. From what I've gathered, now that's to be fair, this is from a fact or fiction myth-busting article from history.net, sorry. History Hit is a lovely YouTube channel run by British people. They talk a lot about British history. Very fascinating, though. anyways, History.net's article, what I found is the village that the hostiles have set up is probably about 1.5 miles in length. It's maybe a half mile wide. So it's far smaller than some of the legends will have you to believe. It is big, but again, its size is not unusual in this situation. It may just be a little larger than your typical gathering of different tribes on the Little Bighorn River. And what's going on in June of 1876? Who are all these guys gathered? Well, these are Lakota Sioux that are being led by the likes of Sitting Bull and Crazy Horse. And you're going to have some elements of the Cheyenne led by people like Lame White Man and Two Moons. And we know there's a few Arapaho. I think it's like 5 Arapaho found their way into camp the night before. They kind of got lost and were invited into camp after they proved, no, we're not with the United States. We're just kind of out here hunting ourselves. But it was tradition in the late spring, early summer to gather in areas either like the Black Hills or places around where we know that buffalo paths are moving through, like around the Little Bighorn, where they would gather they're almost like rendezvous, really. Some of these tribes coming together and just collectively hunting. And they will also be doing their traditional sun dance. Some of these tribes have believed in doing the sun dance. If you hear about one of the legends, you hear about Sitting Bull having an epiphany during his sun dance just a week before, where he envisioned soldiers falling down into a village on the Little Bighorn. Take that as what you will. And again, I could be here all day. There's many different leaders, many different clans in this village. I'm just being brief for the sake of time. But there's probably a couple thousand people down there. If I had to estimate, probably about 3,000 people in total are in this village. And keep in mind, these villages are not permanent. They're nomadic people. These are set up. They're designed to be set up pretty quickly, hunt, exhaust the game in the region, exhaust any potential vegetation in the region, exhaust the tall grass, the prairie grass, to feed horses, and then move on to the next location, which is maybe why Custer changes his tune, goes from a consistent march over the mountains to, oh my God, we found them. This is a massive village. This may be everybody in one spot. We can surround them and round them up, and this thing's gonna be over right here, right now. So that's the situation, what's going on the Little Bighorn River morning of June 25th. We got a large, but a not unusual village located on the Little Bighorn. And it seems that Custer wants to take the initiative and kind of wants to resolve this great Sioux War of 1876 right here, right now. We all know things are about to change. There is a lot of tension in the chain of command of the 7th U.S. Cavalry going into June 25th. I unfortunately do not have time to get into it. I'm not that well knowledgeable on it. What I will say briefly is Custer will decide to divide the regiment into free battalions for more mobile operations that day. He's going to put one battalion in the trust of Major Marcus Reno, who was essentially the second in command of the whole regiment up to this point, to have companies A, G, and M, about 140 men under his command. His directions, and again, this is where things get fuzzy, where you get contradictory orders and descriptions. His orders from Custer appear to be go down into the valley, cross the Little Bighorn, and move in upon the village from the south. Now, what's Custer's plan? Beyond taking a battalion of 5 companies, about 210 men, he's going to continue north using the ridges. And from there, we don't know, actually. Then we have Captain Frederick Benteen. He is kind of your third in command of the regiment this day. He's going to be entrusted with another battalion, companies D, H, and K. These guys, about 125 men, they're ordered to actually move much farther south of the battlefield to try to set them in an area where they kind of, I guess, be in the south and potentially even in the west and prevent any potential escape. When Reno and Custer make contact with the village, they know people are going to be flying in all over directions. So they don't want these people to get away. So Benteen is sent out there kind of as a mopping operation for whenever the camp breaks and scatters. Benteen did not like where he was put in command that morning. It is very well known that he disagreed with Custer with this dividing up of the regiment. So that's part of the part of the friction. Another part of the friction comes down to that Custer and Reno are very two different characters, to say this to me. I mean, we know Custer's a legend. The layman American knows who George Armstrong Custer is because of how, I just want to say, how flamboyant he can sometimes be. Now, I think a lot of movies nowadays hype it up. They way exaggerate how flamboyant it was. Custer knew when to be serious. Custer knew when he had to come down to do business. He knew when he had to make the unpopular decision as well. But Custer also, he had a custom tailored uniform at the Battle of Gettysburg. It was really cool looking, not to lie to you. Yeah. He was somebody who wasn't always in military dress, bit of an oddball, if you know what I'm referencing, if you know what I mean. And, I think he definitely leaned into his flamboyancy. It definitely got a lot of people to like him and be friends with him. And also probably that also helped save his hide when he upset other people in the command of the United States Army. Like, I've heard that there was a possibility that he would not even been out in this battle because he was in trouble with the Grant administration in late 1875, early 1876. And there was it took a lot of convincing to allow Grant to approve Sheridan and Sherman allowing Custer to go out to lead the 7th Cavalry again. Yeah. I don't know all the details on that. I just know that Custer almost missed his last stand, and he actually probably would have survived and lived a fruitful life if that had been the case. Reno, on the other hand, from the Little Bighorn, he's a brooding figure. Now, he had some valid reasons to be a little pessimistic in life, but he definitely wasn't the nicest person to be around, at least not in the military, from my gather. I'm not saying he had a wife at one point. He had a child, so he definitely had a decent private life going, but it just seemed that his personality he also rubbed people the wrong way. But where Custer was too much of a person to handle, Reno was kind of too stilted of a character to handle, if that makes any sense how I'm describing it. Then you have Benteen, who's kind of like the middleman between these. So yeah, all three of them, there's some, they don't all three get along with each other. Star Fury has chimed in. Have you noticed how I say Star Fury like Captain Garrett does? That means I've watched too much of the Swords and Starships podcast. Would maintain the force in total rather than divide into 3 regiments have made a significant difference. They would still have been outnumbered at least 3 to 4 to 1. And that's a fair point. I mean, if you put all the numbers together, I think it's like 600 to 700 men make up the 7th U.S. Cavalry on June 25th. And I forgot to mention there's another 100 guys that are not on this list. They're guarding the pack horses. So these are guys who, for lack of better terms, were either their horses were lame that morning from the march, or the soldiers were sick, so they were put in the way rear. They had a pack train, and that is going to come and play tonight. So they're down there protecting the pack train. So there's actually 4 battalions all said and done, but it's about 600 men. And then this gets into the obvious: how well reconnoitered was the village? The Indian scouts of Custer reported that there was a large village and that we've been spotted, and that's what Custer seems to be operating off of. But did he actually get a description of the strength? And there's also, I mean, we really don't know what the numbers of the warriors are. The estimate I use, because I usually tend to try to be like the middleman when it comes to numbers. I'll take like your highest and your lowest, and I try to play the median number, even if it's not what's in history. Like I've done it a lot with like Pickett's Charge. I usually stick to like the 12,500, just because I'm like, I like my middle numbers. I use 1,500 warriors, but it may very likely be more than that. In any case, they're walking into a bad situation, and I don't know how much of them know it. And it's also something I need to mention. Custer had been in a similar situation back in 1868 at the Washita River, which, depending on who you ask, some say it's a battle, some say it's a massacre. Basically, what ended up happening was Custer was put in a situation where he surrounded a Cheyenne village that was under the leadership of a guy by the name of Black Kettle. And he tried to double envelop it. He also took women and children hostage and kind of used them as hostages to deter fire from the Cheyenne during the Washita River battle, massacre, how you describe it. There was a point where he almost got over, one of his flanks almost got overrun, but in the nick of time, U.S. reinforcements came to the aid of Custer, and his double pincer movement ultimately succeeded that day and destroyed the village. So some have said that what he's trying to do at Little Bighorn, he is trying to redo what he did at the Washita River. And that means he clearly did not learn his lessons from the Washita River, in that you made the double pincer move because you got some last minute reinforcements. If those guys had not shown up at the last minute, one of your flanks would have been exposed and you'd have been surrounded by Cheyenne, very mobile Cheyenne forces. So let that keep in mind as well about what's to go in. But with that being said, let's keep moving. We know Reno descends into the valley. He's going to come toward this multi-tribe village from the south. Custer is going across the ridges that overlook the east bank of the Little Bighorn, and Benteen is way off to the south, kind of trying to set himself in position to block any escape that these villagers may make. We know it as the Battle of Little Bighorn, or simply Custer's Last Stand. But to be technical, if you talk to somebody from the Lakota Sioux clan, Dakota Sioux, sorry, I'm getting a little tongue-tied. You talk with the Arapaho, you're going to talk with Cheyenne. They're going to tell you it's the Battle of the Greasy Grass, which is a very accurate description when you see photos of this landscape with the tall prairie grass. Yes, Greasy Grass is actually a very good description of the battlefield they're about to move into. This map was done by the National Park Service. It just kind of giving you an overview of the troop movements that day. Like I said, we're not going to go into all of it. I really hope someday I can go and see this battlefield. It's on my bucket list. I want to see this one so badly. It's a beautiful piece of landscape, and it's also haunting when you know what happened. So if you look to the bottom right, you'll see a blue arrow. That is to represent Reno's battalion moving down into the valley. They're going to make contact with actually Sitting Bull's village, believe it or not. He was kind of on the southern end of the village at the time. So they're going right into a Lakota Sioux encampment. And well, things immediately go awry. We are looking roughly in the perspective of if you were with Reno's battalion June 25th, exactly 150 years ago, you're looking toward the villages, the southern tips of these villages. And well, as soon as Reno orders you to dismount, you're going to be startled to see that, well, there's resistance coming, and it's resistance in excessive force. I'm going to be honest with you guys. I really don't know what causes Reno to shut down. The popular story is very soon into the fight. There was a native scout. I think his name was Bloody Knife, if I'm not mistaken. Bloody Knife had been a scout, very close acquaintance with Custer, believe it or not. And he had guided Reno's battalion into this position. And he's one of the first to fall. And basically his head is hit with a direct shot, and the blood splatters over Reno, or so the account says. And people claim at that moment, Reno lost his nerve, akin to Hooker losing his nerve at Chancellorsville, for example. From thereafter, we get very strange orders that are said to come from Reno of mounting, dismounting, mounting, dismounting. No, I'm not glitching out. They claim he keeps repeating the same orders like twice or 3 different times. It's confusing the companies down there. And it is by time for the warriors to raise the alarm for the encampments that were under attack. Everybody's coming out on horseback or charging out on foot. Keep in mind, too, it's not, we get this popular image that it's all of these warriors with Winchester rifles. It's not all like that. Yeah, the Winchester was there. It's just some had Winchester, some had smoothbore muskets, some even had, old school flintlocks. A lot of bows and arrows are employed at the Battle of Little Bighorn, so it's a real hodgepodge of weaponry, and that starts pouring in. So the variety of different weaponry, maybe that starts spooking Reno as well. It's really hard to know what happened, but we know that Reno's battalion does not perform well, and they very quickly begin losing ground in this vicinity. And honestly, I'd say this is probably the beginning of the end of Custer right here, and Custer's not even evolved yet. Somebody who fell in this early valley fight and the retreat back across Little Bighorn River was a guy by the name of Jacob Gebhardt. However, his comrades did not know him as that. They knew him as Jacob Tanner. And this is one of the first free Western Pennsylvanians we're going to talk about tonight that were participating in the Little Bighorn. The little I can gather from an article that was published back in 2000 in the Western Pennsylvania Historical Magazine says that he was originally from Altoona, ended up moving, spent most of his childhood in Latrobe, Westmoreland County, Pennsylvania. He would end up enlisting under a false name, Jacob Tanner. And the reason is it's said that he decided to join the 7th Cavalry to escape creditors that were coming to collect his dues. He did not want to go to debtor's prison. He was in a lot of debt, apparently, in Westmoreland County. So his last choice was join the army. And then very quickly, at least according to the author who wrote the article's reading, apparently there's letters of him writing to his mother, pleading with her, please send the letter to the U.S. Army. Please request them to get me out of the service. This was much harder than I anticipated. I promise I'm going to get a better job on a railroad nearby. So just get me out. Say that you don't approve of my enlisting and that I'm your only source of income. Yeah, I want to do more research about this guy because, like I said, I only had time to read an article and to find a grave and kind of confirm his name through a couple rosters. But I want to prove that this debtor story is true or not because it fascinates me. Was Reno related to the one killed in action at South Mountain? I looked into that. I don't see any. I think, and the reason is I know Jesse Reno, the one that's killed at South Mountain, he's actually a Pennsylvanian, believe it or not. So I actually want to do a video about him someday. This Reno is from Illinois, if I'm not mistaken. Although Marcus Reno, he's actually going to end up marrying a woman from Harrisburg, oddly enough. So there is a Pennsylvania tie. I kind of just go and do right now, answering some questions. Johnny Utah, as he chimes in, yeah, 210 versus 2000. It's not a chance in hell. Again, keep in mind, Custer doesn't know that yet. Books wants to chime in. Don't forget the weapons and ammunition the U.S. Cavalry had, which is a fair point. But as we mentioned, we're getting to a point where it's really uncertain. And that horses could be used as cover. I'll just leave Books and Battlefields speak there in a Sam Elliott voice. Man, we got a lot of comments. Really good. We're having a really good communication. I think guys are joining in. And if this is your first time watching Readout Production, you found it because, we're celebrating the 150 of Custer's Last Stand. You're looking for content to commemorate that. I don't do live streams regularly. I do them irregularly. It's just one of several things I do on this channel. When I do a live stream like this, I love doing, I call my virtual battle walks or my battle deep dives. We've done stuff very similar to this live stream on the Texas Revolution. We've done stuff on the Overland Campaign in the Civil War. We covered all the major battles for the 160th anniversary. My live shows, after they go live, I take them down off the main channel and I repost them on Readout Productions Replay. So you can watch the whole back catalog on Readout Productions Replay. The main channel, what we do here is we go out and document sites usually pertaining to forgotten or lesser known chapters of American history. So I like to explore the stuff that's less known. That's like tonight, I want to talk about the Battle of Little Bighorn a little bit for the perspective of the likes of Jacob Gebhardt, because you didn't get to hear about him in most history books. He's not some leader of this battle. He's just a yeoman who unfortunately got caught in the crossfire of this terrible situation. He was enlisting to resolve some debts back at home. He could not imagine it was going to lead to his demise in a place foreign to him, the Montana territory. That's the stuff I like to explore. So we try to upload a new video every Saturday. It goes live at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We'll have a new video coming out this Saturday about a family that lost a lot in the American Civil War. It's all the more I can really say right now, but a family that suffered a lot. One Pennsylvania farming family, 5 members of the family served in the Union Army during the Civil War, and they suffered terribly. And I want to tell you their story tomorrow. So if you enjoyed this live stream, consider hitting the like button. And if you want to follow some future ventures, be sure to subscribe here to Readout Productions. All right. Sorry for the detour, Johnny. I was using you to shield my channel. Back to what you were saying. Custer refused to take the Hodgkin guns with him because he said it slowed them down. Yeah, he refused to take Gatling guns. He refused to take heavier armament because it would slow him down. And I believe he was correct on that. That's just me personally. Could he have used them? Yes, but I get why he said no to it. Yeah, greasy grass. Starfury chimes in. Piss poor intelligence, tactical tunnel vision, poor assumptions. Sounds like a complete disaster waiting to happen. Oh, you betcha. Got to get to, yeah, got to get to a little bit. Yeah, we got to get a Little Bighorn one day. Man, I missed a lot of comments. I'm really catching up. I did good research. Oh, thank you. And by thank you, Editor Chan, thanks you very much. Why didn't Reno's number 2 take charge if Reno lost his nerve? That is a very good question. I'm going to kind of answer it later, but why nobody in that moment didn't take charge? I unfortunately don't have the answer at this time. I think at this point they had the 73 Springfield trapdoor, which is it's a cool looking firearm, but it also has its problems. And that actually, there is some theories as to that may have been leading to Custer's downfall. I'm getting ahead of myself. Yeah, I think they were armed with the 73 Springfield, which is a breech loader. So that's where the trapdoor name comes from. But I could be mistaken on that. You know what? I'm just going to, while we're on the subject, I don't think guys don't mind if I detour a little bit, do you? Let me look up a little bit. What is the 7th Cavalry's? What are they equipped with going into June 25th of 1876, 150 years ago? But I think it is the 73 trapdoor. We're going to go to Rock Island Auction. I guess I should share my screen. All right, let's read here a little bit. We're going on a little tangent. I'm curious. Okay, this is an article by Kurt Aylmeyer from Rock Island Auction Company, Guns of the Little Bighorn. Go down a little bit here. A U.S. Springfield 1873 trapdoor carbine falls into the range of carbines issued to the 7th Cavalry. Will be available. Okay, this is about a sale. Should be down here soon. I'm trying to get more information on this. The village of about 8,000 people included 1,200 to as many as 2,500 warriors. The tribal warriors were armed with Henry rifles, Winchester Model 1866 and 1873 rifles, as well as the Spencer and Sharps rifles. Immediately engaged with 2 of Custer's detachments that had been fended off a ferocious assault for several hours while Custer's 5 companies were cut off. When the gun smoke dissipated, 260, Custer's Last Stand, 268 were killed. So it's a variety on the native side. The guns of the 7th Cavalry. Fall in the Civil War, the cavalry on the Great Plains was poorly armed due to financial constraints in place of the Ordnance Department. However, things changed in 1873 with a new firearm. A 50 caliber carbine from Springfield Armory started development in 1870, did not appear until nearly the same time as the Colt Single Action Army. The Springfield 1873 and the Single Action Army were standard issue to the 10 regiments of the cavalry. Among the most desirable in firearm collector circles are SAAs in the 4-digit serial number from 921, which were issued to the 7th Cavalry, and 632 that rode to the Little Bighorn. Yeah, so seems that they had a variety. It seems they largely had the Springfield 73, and they also had single action armies. There's a serial on a 73 trapdoor proving that it could have been likely taken with the 7th Cavalry because it was issued around that time to these units. The reason I'm a nerd for the trapdoor is because that's what the Pennsylvania National Guard end up getting. Like when you get into like the railroad strike of 1877 and other coal strikes they break up in the 1890s. And I think they had it with them when they went into the Philippines during the Spanish American War. I could be mistaken. I forget if that's when they got changed out with new weapons. But So that's why I'm a bit of a nerd. I'm like, I think they have the semi-free trap door, and it's a cool looking gun, but its breach can have some difficils. So yeah, there's the answer there. So natives had a variety. Henrys, they had Henrys, Winchesters, Spencers, and Sharps. The 7th Cavalry were carrying the single action arm from Colt as well as the Springfield 1873. Alrighty, got that answered. Alrighty, what else we got to say? It does. It makes the historical content richer. And then we get. I'm not even getting into sidearms. I'm a long gun guy. We're not getting into sidearms. No disrespect, books and battlefield. But you're free to do that in the comments section of the chat. You want to talk about the sidearms a little bit, Gordon? By all means. Yeah, and they also, in addition, I know a lot of them say you can tell if it was a rifle that was carried by Plains Indians, usually because the stock is shaved down. That's actually something I caught on listening to the Tavern Talk from Addressing Gettysburg. They were talking about, because they brought an example of a Winchester that they're not certain it was that Little Bighorn, but it meets the time period and it shows evidence that the stock was shaved down, which was typical for the period. The rate of fire, I want to say it's like 5 to 7 rounds a minute if you're well trained. I could be mistaken on that though. Alrighty, let me get this log back in. Slides. I gotta figure out how to do this again. I'm not gonna complain about the thing. I'm not gonna say the thing, Ken. I promise. I just gotta share the screen. Yes. All right, we're gonna get back to the show. One moment, guys. Thank you for tuning in. Just hold one moment as I do battle with a certain software. I'm not allowed to name anymore on camera, or else I don't know, something bad will happen to me. I don't know. All right, we're back. We're back to the show. Back to the show. So yeah, Gebhardt. Sorry, Mr. Gebhardt. I got a tangent all over while I was showing your centograph. Anyways, so he was with Company M. He was with Reno's battalion. He's one of the guys that's down at an early Valley fight, and he's forced to flee back across Little Bighorn. It's sometime from the Valley fight for the retreat back up to the bluffs that he is mortally wounded, and he will die the night of June 25th. He will actually likely die from his wounds in the middle of the defense that Reno and Benteen are going to have to eventually form into the night of June 25th. We'll get to that in a moment. Interesting detail. He is buried at Little Bighorn National Monument. That's where his final remains are. That is not his headstone, but that is his brother's headstone. On the back of his brother, who turns out to be a Civil War veteran, on the back, they etched in memory of for Jacob, which even states that he was killed at the Battle of Little Bighorn. And this grave is located very close to where the headquarters of Redoubt Productions is. So maybe a future episode of Retracing History. So right now we are looking east on the ridge between Calhoun Hill and Last Stand Hill. I'm going to be honest. When I usually do these virtual battle walks, I'll go to Google Drive, Google Streets, and I'll just copy and paste from there. Nobody's done a Google Street View of the tour routes of Little Bighorn. So all I got are like a few shots and then like Wikimedia posts and then from the historical marker database. So I'm not getting the best images I would want to show you because it's beautiful landscape, but we are looking east. So we're looking, our backs are right now turned to the Little Bighorn River if we're standing where this photo's taken. And we're looking in the direction where elements of Custer's battalion have started to spread out. Now, like we said, we don't know really what Custer was doing on his end, but we know that there's a lot of movement happening on Custer's end of the battlefield, on the north side of the battlefield. We know that it looked like he tried to come down from the bluffs toward the village. Then it looks like he was chased back up onto the bluffs. Then it looks like at one point he charged down into the ravines. And then elements of his are driven back up the ravines. They are moving all over the place. But eventually warriors start isolating the battalion. The battalion starts getting pulled apart. And then at least one, if not two different companies, I think it's companies I and H, I could be wrong on that, they end up being pinned down around Calhoun Hill, which is actually to the right of the photo. We're kind of we're in the depression between the two hills. And it's here where there's going to be an intense firefight between portions of Captain Keogh's company of the 7th Cavalry with Crazy Horse. So this is actually where, if you hear a lot about Crazy Horse with Lakota Sioux, this is where we know for certain that this famed war chief is going to be involved in some heavy fighting, and he will be involved with subduing the cavalrymen up on Calhoun Hill. And then, of course, here we are looking west, looking down upon the Little Bighorn Valley below. The tree line at the bottom of the hill kind of marks where the river is. Everything in the foreground, you would have seen a seesaw action 150 years ago today as Custer's battalion tries to force its way into the village, realize that they've made a mistake, tries pulling back, pushes back down again, and quite famously, a message is going to arrive, not to Reno's battalion, but it's going to be sent to Benteen, which is, if I'm not going to be on, I don't have it pulled up, but I could just go right to the Readout Productions page, because that's how I promoted this, because it's like a very, gosh, it's a haunting message, especially when you realize everything's in chaos at this point. Benteen, come on, big village, be quick, bring packs, PS, bring packs. And everybody has debated what that means. We can assume part of it means get Benteen's battalion, forget your earlier plan, get up here to the front. It also means probably to bring either ammunition pouches or to bring the pack train itself up. Benteen has gone on record to say that he was very much confused by this order. He didn't know what to do. He will wait like a full 20 minutes for the pack train, because he's like, well, if he says I need to bring the packs, I need to wait for the pack train. So he's going to wait 20 minutes before he decides, you know what? I hear a lot of gunshots happening. I hear a lot of screaming happening in the distance. I'm getting up there, and he'll run forward of his battalion back up. They're going to run back up onto the bluffs. And by the time they get up there is when they encounter Reno's shattered battalion. And Reno just, the description of him at this point, he has a red bandana around his hat. He's out of breath. He's clearly exhausted and frantic, and he really just is not in a position to be leading troops anymore. He has clearly got whipped. Benteen is going to ask Reno, come on, we got to go ride to Custer. Reno's going to shout at him not to do so. You're going to get yourself killed. Stay here, make a defense. And that is what will ultimately happen on the southern end of the battlefield. But what's going on with Custer? Well, at this time, what we're going to do, I'm going to pivot over to an eyewitness testimony from a gentleman by the name of, I've seen his name referred to as White Bull or White Cow Bull, and then he has an anglicized version of it as well. He was part of the Lakota Sioux. He was part of one of those clans of the Lakota Sioux that were down in the village that day. He was only in his late teens when the battle happened. However, he would go on to become one of the last great leaders for the Lakota Sioux into the late 19th and early 20th century, when they had, in the last, I just want to say, the days before everything became just strictly reservation. And he lived until the 1940s, believe it or not. So in 1930s, was it 33 or 37? It was in the 1930s. A gentleman by the name of David Humphrey Miller, who was one of the early historians on the Great Sioux War and on Plain Indians in general, at least United States citizen historian. He did like portraits of 70 natives who claimed to have been at the Battle of Little Bighorn and preserved their likeness through paintings of portraits of them. He also did some oral histories, and he did an interview with White Cow Bull, and White Cow Bull described what he saw at Custer's Last Stand. So what I'm going to read to you now is actually, to be technical, this is a transcript from 100 Voices from Little Bighorn by Bruce Brown, but the history itself, the oral history, was taken back in the 1930s. So I am now going to be speaking what Brown dictates, Humphreys dictated, White Cow Bull claimed happened June 25th, 1876. I gotta get, sorry, I don't talk about the 1870s too much. I talk about the 1860s on this channel more, so you know. After 2 Moon's band left to fight Major Reno, a new threat developed from Custer's detachment advancing down Medicine Tail Coulee toward the river and the Cheyenne camp. "They're coming this way," Bobtail Horse shouted. "Across the ford, we must stop them." We saw the soldiers in the coulee were getting closer and closer to the ford, so we trotted. I just want to make sure I'm on. Good question. What discretion did Reno and Benteen have to refuse Custer's order to go to him? That's a very good question as well, and one that everybody has been disputing to this day. By the way, guys, when I have like an article over here. I just want to make sure the screen's my image has not disappeared. I mean, you could look at a black screen while I'm reading, but I kind of figured it'd be cooler if oh geez, what did I do to my? I just did something to my screen. Don't worry about it. I'm going to just shut up and keep reading. I'm going to keep reading. I'm going to keep reading White Cow Bull's account. Sorry for interrupting White Cow Bull. We saw the soldiers in the coulee were getting closer and closer to the ford, so we trotted out to meet them. Some person by the name of Mad Wolf, riding a rack of bones horse, tried to stop us, saying, "My sons, do not charge the soldiers. There are too many. Wait until our brothers come back to help." He rode along with us away, whining about how such a small war party would have no chance against the whole army. Finally, Bobtail Horse told him, "Uncle, only earth and the heavens last long. If we four can stop the soldiers from capturing our camp, our lives will be well spent." The Sans Arc and Miniconcho's camp circles were back from the ford. We found a low ridge along here and slid off our ponies to take whatever cover we could find. For the first time, I saw 5 Sioux warriors racing down the coulee ahead of the soldiers. They were coming fast and dodging bullets. The soldiers were firing at them. Then Bobtail Horse pointed to the bluff beside the ford. On top were 3 Indians that looked like crows from their hairstyle and dress. Bobtail Horse said, "There are enemies guiding the soldiers here." He fired his muzzleloader at them, then squatted behind the ridge to reload. I fired at them too, for I saw they were shooting at the 5 Sioux warriors, who were now splashing across the ford at a dead run. My rifle was a repeater, so I kept firing at the crows until these Sioux were safely on our side of the river. They had no guns, just lances and bows and arrows, but they got off their ponies and joined us behind the ridge. Just then, I saw someone by the name of White Shield, armed with bows and arrows, come riding down river. He was alone, but we were glad to have another fighting man with us. That made 10 of us to defend the ford. I looked across the ford and saw that the soldiers had stopped at the edge of the river. I'd never seen white soldiers before, so I remember thinking how pink and hairy they looked. One white man had little hairs on his face, a mustache, and was wearing a big hat and a buckskin jacket. He was riding a fine-looking big horse, a sorrel with a blazed face and 4 white stockings. Now, just to give you a bit of an idea, because we're going from a first-person perspective, there's a lot of different names and terminologies that may be thrown out that we're not affiliated with. The best I can say is this account is coming from the area, kind of the part of the village that's across from what's about to become Last Stand Hill, if that makes any sense. So we're in the part of the village west of Last Stand Hill is where at least this account begins with. So keep that in mind with what White Cow Bull is describing. And also note what type of individual he described. I had never seen white soldiers before, so I remember thinking how pink and hairy they looked. One white man had little hairs on his face and was wearing a big hat and a buckskin jacket. He was riding a fine-looking big horse, a sorrel with a blazed face, and 4 white stockings. I'll just let you guys decide who that may or may not be. On one side of him was a soldier carrying a flag and riding a gray horse, and on the other was a small man on a dark horse. The small man didn't look much like a light man to me, so I gave the man in the buckskin jacket my attention. He was looking straight at us across the river. Bobtail Horse told us all to stay hidden so this man couldn't see how few of us there really were. The man in the buckskin jacket seemed to be the leader of these soldiers, for he shouted something and they all came charging at us across the ford. Bobtail Horse fired first, and I saw a soldier on a gray horse fall out of his saddle into the water. The other soldiers were shooting at us now. The man who seemed to be the soldier chief was firing his heavy rifle fast. I aimed my repeater at him and fired. I saw him fall out of his saddle and hit the water. Shooting that man stopped the soldiers from charging on. They all reined up their horses and gathered around where he had fallen. I fired again, aiming this time at the soldier within the flag. I saw him go down as another soldier grabbed the flag out of his hands. But this time the air was getting thick with gun smoke, and it was hard to see just what happened. The soldiers were firing again and again, so we were kept busy dodging bullets that kicked up dust all round. When it cleared a little, I saw the soldiers do a strange thing. Some of them got off their horses in the ford and seemed to be dragging something out of the water, while other soldiers still on horseback kept shooting at us. Suddenly, we heard war cries behind us. I looked to see hundreds of the Lakota Sioux charging toward us. They must have driven away those other soldiers who had attacked the Hunkpapa camp circle and were now racing to help us drive off these attackers. The soldiers must have seen them too, for they fell back to the far bank of the river, and those still on horseback got off to the fight on foot. As warriors rode up to join us on the ridge, a big cry went up. "Hoka hey! They are going!" I saw this was true. The soldiers were running back up the coulee and swarming out over the high ground to the north. Bobtail Horse ran to his pony, shouting to us as we caught our ponies, "Come on, they're running, hurry!" He and I led the masked warriors across the ford, for the others knew we had stood bravely to protect the village and willingly followed us. So now it sounds like from this account, now you're having the forces that were fighting in the very first phase of action, Reno's battalion, on the south side of the village. And now they're going through the village, and now they're going to the north side of the village. Now they're starting to target what's likely Custer's battalion and starting what will become Custer's Last Stand. And I forgot to chime in a long time ago. It was here somewhere. I went too far. I went too far in the chat. Now I'm completely lost. Oh, here it was. Wrangler had joined us earlier. And if you've ever watched our shows, you know that gets you a... You contribute to the fund of Readout Productions, and David Gilmore will appear for a brief 2 seconds in the live stream against his will. Thank you, Wrangler, for joining us tonight. And let me see, since I last left off, we got a bunch more comments. Did the 7th Cavalry have entrenching tools? Very good question. I don't have the answer. They will entrench, but I don't think they had any formal tools that night. So they used what they had. So beyond, any types of knives they had, you can use that to your own interpretation, how they entrenched. Andrew, thank you for joining in. It's never too late to join us to learn a bit about history. Yep, the boomsticks have indeed come out here on the Little Bighorn battlefield. Sometimes they do work, and they will form defensive positions. They will use, like I said, they do entrench. A term is used, but it's not like they're throwing up massive breastworks. It's more a combination of any battlefield debris, so dead horses, any type of ammunition boxes, hardtack crates, anything, taking their belts off and piling that up, dead bodies, coats, taking that off and piling up, anything like that. And if whatever they can with their, sometimes literally their bare hands, bayonets, knives, if there's any odd shovels available, they could use them. But I mean, it's very crude entrenchment what they're doing. There's really rifle pits, and that term is used in the archaeology done later on the battlefield. They're finding evidence of rifle pits. Oh, I already read that one. I got so many more. Yep, definitely brave. Eyewitness testimonies, they're I know a lot of people like, you got to take them with a pinch of salt, but also I'm like, yeah, but those guys were there. So maybe they're not remember everything right, but I'm going to take the word of the guy that was there. Yeah, I'm at least going to listen to him. He survived this whole thing. I think he has the right for his words to be recounted time and time again for the history books. I did not. Like I said, I will check that out once I get a break in our stream. But for now, we're going to go back to this eyewitness testimony. This is from White Cow Bull's account of what's happened to Little Bighorn. Another warrior named Yellow Nose, who had been captured as a boy and had grown up with the Shahayela. Shahayela. It's a member of the Lakota Sioux. Grown up with them, was very brave that day. After we chased the soldiers back to the ford, he galloped out in front of us and got very close to them, then raced back to safety. I kept riding with the Shahayelas, still hoping that some of them might tell Motsi later about my courage. We massed for another charge. The Shahayela chief comes in sight, and a warrior by the name of Contrary Big Belly led us at time. The soldier horses were so frightened by all the noise that we were making that they began to bolt in all directions. The soldiers held their fire while they tried to catch their horses. Just then Yellow Nose rushed in again and grabbed a small flag from where the soldiers had stuck it in the ground. He carried it off and counted coup, which essentially means striking blows on a soldier of its sharp end. He was proving his courage more by counting that coup than he had killed the soldier. Now I saw the soldiers were split into two bands, most of them on foot and shooting as they fell back to higher ground. So we made no more mounted charges. I found cover and began shooting at the soldiers. I was a good shot and had one of the few repeating rifles carried by any of our warriors. It was up to me to use it the best I could. I kept firing at the two bands of soldiers, first at one, then at another. It was hard to see through the smoke and the dusted, but I saw 5 soldiers go down when I shot at them. Once in a while, some warrior showed his courage by making a charge all by myself. I saw one Shahali wearing a spotted war bonnet and a spotted robe of mountain lion skins ride out alone. "He's charging!" someone shouted. He raced up to the long ridge where the soldiers of one band were making a defense, standing there, holding their horses and keeping up a steady fire. This Shahili charged in almost close enough to touch some of the soldiers and rode around in circles in front of them with bullets kicking up dust all around him. He came galloping back and we all cheered. Then he unfastened his belt and opened his robe and shook many spent bullets out of the ground. The old man grinned at the memory of such courage. It was a day of bravery, even for our soldier enemies. They all fought well and died in courage, except for one soldier on a sorrel horse. He broke away from the others and started riding off down the ridge. 2 Shahilis and a Lakota chased him, shooting at him as they rode. But the soldier's horse was fast and they couldn't catch him. I saw him yank out his revolver and thought he was going to shoot back at these warriors. Instead, he put the revolver to his head, pulled the trigger, and fell dead. A little while, all the bullets were gone, but by that time, the soldiers lay still. We had killed them all. The battle was over. Soon we were shouting victory yells. When the women and children heard us, they came out to the ridge to strip the bodies and catch some of the big horses the soldiers had ridden. Some women had lost husbands or brothers or sons in the fight, so they butchered the soldier bodies to show their grief and anger. So, like I said, that is an account from... Hold on, it's all whacked out. So a certain device I'm not allowed to say anymore. It is completely whacked out. Okay, we got to fix. I had to scrunch the screen. I'm like, oh my God, I can't see my own television. Oh my God. So anyways. So that is White Cow Bull's account of Custer's Last Stand. There are many eyewitness testimonies, which unfortunately up until about like the last 30 years, they largely were going overlooked, especially the eyewitness testimony of the Native warriors that actually participated in the battle and actually were the reason that, all of Custer's battalion got wiped out. But for many years, nobody was taking their word at face value. Like, oh, no, that's not true at all. Well, yeah, they were the ones there. Funny enough, they were telling the truth of what happened. Now, there's always differences in every account. There's many different claims over who actually killed George Armstrong Custer. At the end of the day, it gets down to a point of there's certain things that we're never going to know, and maybe we're not meant to know certain things. What we do know is that by 5 p.m. on June 25th, 1876, over 200 men of the 7th U.S. Cavalry had become pinned down in an area that's now known as Last Stand Hill. Now, as I said, they weren't just standing there for an hour or so on end. What happened was They seem to have come down to try to cross a ford into the village from the north end, were driven back. It was a seesaw battle. But over that period of time, as the warriors pushed up the bluffs, Custer's men returned action. Custer's ground became less and less. And eventually the companies got picked off one by one until just gradually the last person was killed. However, the Battle of Little Bighorn does not end with the death of Custer and the annihilation of his battalion. Oh no, there's going to be a lot more fighting. Oh, you thought the stream was wrapping up in an hour and a half in. Oh no. Oh no. We're only about halfway through the battle, guys. We are only halfway through the battle, guys, because like I mentioned, a lot of people forget. I'm grabbing something. A lot of people forget that we have 2 other battalions of the 7th U.S. Cavalry still operating very close. And also keep in mind, elements of Reno and Benteen's battalion, which by 5 p.m. they've unified, and the pack horses have now come up as well. Finally, they've come up a little too late to help Custer, but they did come up. So we have these surviving companies. About half of the 7th U.S. Cavalry is now unified in one spot on the battlefield. They'll get to an area called Weir Point, which you can actually see it in this image. You see that high hilltop, that high pointed hilltop on the right-hand side of the image. That's Weir Point. That's as far as any of Reno and Benteen's portion of the regiment advanced on June 25th. They get up there late in the day and they just see warriors on horseback and on foot basically going in circles around the bluffs beyond them, and this smoke rising, and they know what's going on up there. Custer's been cut off, and before they have the chance to even think about running in to break up what's happening, now they start seeing warriors turning toward the south. Now portions of these thousands of warriors are moving toward Reno and Benteen's remains. So at this time, it seems that Benteen kind of usurps command over Reno, and he's the one who's in charge of what's left of the 7th U.S. Cavalry. So back to Starfear's question of why didn't Reno take command? Why is Benteen? Well, at this point, Reno's kind of been put into the corridor type deal. It's like, okay, you're excused. You're done for the day. Just checking something really quickly. I'm very high tech. Oh, thank you, Books and Battlefield. Like I said, I knew that eyewitness testimony was gonna be a big chunk of the stream. So I'm like, I gotta get through this. We're on a good downward slope from here now. So thank you, Books and Battlefield. I got your message. I'll check what you sent me in more detail here later tonight, but thank you for now. Paul Stanley. We are just getting started. Yes. 3 to 407 Cavalry still need to be accounted for. Yeah, 3 to 400. So yeah, we got this is the rest of them. So here they are. They're up here on what some call Reno Hill or Reno Benteen Ridge, or, there's different names for this area of the battlefield. We're about 3 miles south from Last Stand Hill, actually. And this is where the longest protracted fight of the battle is actually going to occur. It doesn't happen at Last Stand Hill. It happens down here because these guys are in for a fight for survival. That's going to go into the night of June 25th, into the day of June 26th. Not a lot of people talk about this. The average histories do not tell you that the battle just gets worse. For the 7th Cavalry, at least, it just gets worse. So what's going on here? Well, we have 2 other Western Pennsylvanians that are going to tell you a bit more what happens. So Benteen organizes a defense. He's ordering his men to dig in, which really is just throw whatever you can to make a defense. And really the plan is to hold out until help comes. Keep in mind, there's 2 other columns operating for the U.S. Army in the region. Pretty darn close, no less. So they're open, with all the noise we've been making, somebody's eventually going to figure out what's going on and come to our aid, hopefully. So they're up there throughout June 25th. And keep in mind, guys, shots are still in close range are being made upon Benteen's defensive formation. There's an area to the north of where the perimeter is, where the 7th Cavalry perimeter is. It's called Sharpshooter's Ridge. It's literally called that because very likely people who had were good shots, like White Cow Bull, who we talked about earlier. They're up there on the ridge. I think it's only like a football field length from the fence perimeter, and they're just shooting down into the perimeter, and it's happening on all sides. Benteen, Reno's men, they're surrounded this night. It had to be the most horrifying experiences to be in the 7th U.S. Cavalry that night. And also, keep in mind, they're cut off from any resources. All they got is what they brought with them onto the battlefield that day, and whatever meager supplies are brought up by pack horses. There's no water. Any water, you got to go out of the perimeter down to the either into the sharp ravines or into the Little Bighorn itself. And that, of course, runs the risk of being attacked. So Henry Mechlin, or Mechlin, I don't know how you pronounce it, if it's Mechlin or Mechlin. He's from Mount Pleasant, Westmore County, Pennsylvania, not too far from Latrobe, Pennsylvania. So we're kind of just moving down here. He was a blacksmith by private trade, and then became the blacksmith for Company H of the 7th U.S. Cavalry. He served on for a couple years at this point. His father was a Civil War veteran. I believe he was also a cavalry veteran as well. His father was. He was with Benteen's battalion, initially trying to cut off a potential escape route for the village, but then when everything went awry, got recalled, and now Benteen's in charge, or de facto in charge. So what happens is the night of 25th, they need water, for lack of better terms. These guys desperately need water. So he is assigned with going to, Mechlin is assigned with going to the extreme left flank of the perimeter, and kind of he and a few other guys, I think it's like 3 different guys, they kind of like snake their way from the left flank of the perimeter down into a ravine, and they're providing cover fire for these guys running down and running up with canteens of water throughout the night. And for this action, Henry Mechlin, or Mechlin, I think it's Mechlin, was awarded he would earn the Medal of Honor. He would get it. He would earn it 2 years later. He would receive in 1878. Sorry, I have to tiptoe over when I say award or earn. People get really, really angry at me when I say awarded. And I get why. I get that people think they're like, well, you're just saying that like you're awarding it like you won it like a sport championship. You earn it. You do your sacrifice. I'm fully aware of this. I'm just saying that a synonym of earned is typically awarded. It's a medal. Sorry, I'm not trying to. I think 200 plus history videos prove that when I say awarded the Medal of Honor, I'm not trying to demean the Medal of Honor. I think I'm pretty well confident what I'm talking about. I'm trying to show what these actions were all about. Okay, that's my micro rant about angry people in the comment section over with. So yeah, he will receive the Medal of Honor for actions at Little Bighorn. He will assist later after the battle, many years later. He will actually assist in identifying the reinterment of some human remains to Last Stand Hill. Sadly, he lives his whole life as a blacksmith, even after the military. He'll live long enough to see that he'll be doing iron repair work, metal repair work for early automobiles, believe it or not. Sadly, though, he'll fall in some hard times, and he ends up having to live in a veterans home in DC for his final 10 years of life. But he is buried in Arlington National Cemetery. See, Star Fury is going to back me up. Awarded is the appropriate term. A third party awards the commendation to the recipient. And we got Books and Battlefield talk about Paul Stanley and Kiss. Nothing wrong with that. I'm not wearing the most appropriate shirt for, I have AC/DC on. We're going to talk rock bands. Not the most appropriate shirt to wear when doing history, but it is what it is. Another person that's going to endure a harrowing night in the Reno-Benteen defense line is John McGuire. He was born in 1854 near Tunnelton, Indiana County, Pennsylvania, which actually, if you want to know where that's at, if you recall a video we did a few years back about the many tunnels and bridges of Bow Ridge that was located across the Conemaugh River. It's a railroad crossing, and they just keep adding on to it. So first it's like, this is where the canal crossed. Then this is where the 64 alignment for the Pennsylvania Railroad was. And here's the 1907 alignment. And then here's the 1952 alignment, which is still used.
It's like a few miles from there. It's a few miles from Tunnelton. It's actually the address for that park we visited is Tunnelton, Indiana, Pennsylvania. So that's where he's from, if you're wondering. He would enlist as a private in Company C, 7th U.S. Cavalry. Company C is one of the 5 companies Custer took to what becomes Last Stand Hill. However, as I mentioned, there were elements of all 3 battalions that were sent to guard the pack horse because either they were ill or they had issues with their horses. McGuire was having issues. His horse was very sickly June 25th. So he was sent out of Company C to the pack train, which is why he's not on Last Stand Hill. He'll then join Benteen and join everybody up on this defensive perimeter later that day. And during his night, his job is to secure all the horses. So tie down the horses for the pack mules, tie down the mules for the pack train. That was my better term phrase. And then also to tie down any surviving horses so they don't run off because they're getting spooked by everything that's happening around them, all the gunshots, the smoke that's rising, war cries, trying to keep them within the perimeter so they can use them and trying to keep them low and keep them safe from being hit by bullets. So that was his job overnight. And he actually gets wounded during his action. He gets shot in his right elbow. And he describes about having to be treated, being seeking surgical aid immediately. There was a field hospital within the defensive zone, in the middle of it. And it was just a canvas, like a couple canvases they buttoned up together and threw over. So it was probably very low. You had to keep pretty low because bullets are whizzing through the tent. That's what McGuire described as he was being attended to. He will live, but his right arm will be paralyzed the rest of his life. But he does stay in the military for 13 more years, and he does live all the way to 1932, believe it or not. Yeah, it's a little wild, when you start thinking about it. You feel like it's 150 years ago, it's long ago, and then you realize, I forgot to mention, you want to hear something really wild. Meglin's daughter, I think her name was Minnie Grace, she would be the last living child of any Little Bighorn survivor, at least from the U.S. 7th Cavalry. She was born in 1907. Yeah, it was one of them weird ones where, very late in age type deal. They got married. She was born in the early 1900s, lived until 2006. Last child of a 7th Cavalry survivor from Little Bighorn. Lived till 2006. That was his daughter. It's crazy. These events are not that far apart as we think they are. We're not that removed from as we think they are. Yeah. It is. It really is. I think it's the defensive pocket. I think it was another 55 were killed between Benteen and Reno's battalions. But those casualties are counted for all 2 days of battle, not just the overnight defense. The actions on June 26, firing will still be commenced by the warriors upon Reno Hill. However, it's definitely notable that these warriors are keeping their distance. Now, they're not in close quarter fighting. They're fighting long distance. So they're keeping a heavy fire, keeping these U.S. cavalrymen from retreating, withdrawing. And the reason is they're more just trying to buy the village time to tear down, account for their dead and wounded, which, by the way, guys, we should keep in mind, since you have these warriors going back and through the village, first from the south end of the village to the north end of the village, running all around. We know that Reno and it seems Custer's, both their battalions got on the outskirts of the village. It is reported that there were at least there were a handful, I think it's I've heard 6 to 10 civilians in the village were killed. It could be more. It's very vague when we get to the fatalities and wounded suffered amongst the native village of Little Bighorn. So that's something to keep in mind as well. But the fight on June 26th is really a stalling tactic. So they're burning powder and expending arrows really just to keep the cavalrymen pinned down to allow the village time to tear down and get out of the location. The fighting's over. But, a lot of shooting still going on. And by June 27th, elements of the other U.S. columns begin to arrive in the region, relieving the remains of Reno and Benteen's commands, officially ending the Battle of Little Bighorn. When it's all told, 268 men have been killed in the 7th U.S. Cavalry. Another 55 were wounded. Native loss, they mentioned, are disputed. It's anywhere from 30 to 100 killed. Some eyewitnesses have said it was as many as 160. Nobody knows for certain. I think the Park Service tends to run on the low end where it's about 25 to 30 were killed, but it's one of them. Nobody's really going to know for certain. In the short term, this is probably the biggest victory that at least the Plains people ever get over the United States and the United States Armed Forces. It is not the biggest defeat of the U.S. Army by indigenous forces, however. It is, I forget like the ranking. It's nowhere, it's barely in the top 10. It's actually the highest ranking is what's known as the Battle of the Wabash, sometimes called St. Clair's Defeat, which was fought in very, very western Ohio today, in a place called Fort Recovery, Ohio. And it will be an episode of Retracing History one day, I promise. That was part of the Northwest War. We've talked about St. Clair's Defeat in passing, especially in our Fallen Timbers video, but we've yet to actually visit the site yet. So if you want to talk about the biggest defeat that the U.S. will ever suffer to Native American forces, it's Battle Wabash. But still, the Battle of Little Bighorn sends shockwaves for the nation. Imagine receiving this news on the centennial of the country's independence. Yet it did not go over well with the American press. And then, of course, there's the controversy over what was Custer's final plan that day. Nobody will ever know for certain. There's a lot of theories. Archaeology has backed certain theories. Eyewitness testimony backs others. But at the end of the day, we'll never know for 100%. Then you get into the arguments over what went wrong with Reno's attack on the southern end of the village. Was Reno wrong in what his actions were that day? Was Benteen wrong in his actions that day? Books of Battle puts it this way. Well, we know his plan was one thing, not to lose and not to die. And, well, he failed at both of those. Yeah, it's still heavy losses, but yeah, it's still heavy losses. I'm not trying to demean what happened here. Everybody will say, it's just the greatest. It's like, well, if you want to get into the numbers and you want to get into bigger, and there are more bigger battles, but this is still a shocking loss for the United States Army to suffer. And it is a much needed victory for the Sioux, for the Cheyenne. And keep in mind, a lot of these folks that were in that camp in the village that day, they had family members who had suffered from numerous incidents going back decades with the United States forces. Their ancestors, many of them had gone through displacement, have been pushed around to different locations to settle. Now they're being pushed into these reservations. You have some people that, probably had ties to the Ouachita River or the Sand Creek massacre that occurred in 1864. Although a lot of people think that one Custer was at Ouachita, he was not at Sand Creek. They're different commanders, but Sand Creek did have affiliation with the Cheyenne, I'm aware of. So just keep that in mind. These other events that happened, all these massacres, all these destructive elements to the Sioux, to the Cheyenne, to the Arapaho, and to other Plains Indians that were living around them. So for this to happen it was a resounding victory. It was, for a brief moment, the biggest boost of morale you could have. However, it will not last long, because the United States of America was not going to let the death of George Armstrong Custer, a celebrity general from the American Civil War, they were not going to allow his death to go unanswered. So very quickly, you're going to see an increase in military occupation of the Montana territory and in the surrounding areas. And that's to, of course, try to corner these hostile forces and drive them on the reservation. But it's also to deprive the Great Sioux reservation, those that stayed on the reservation, and those that did not join people like Sitting Bull to continue essentially quietly protest and to continue in their nomadic way of life. Even if you were on the reservation, you're going to be hurt as well. The U.S. will begin to deny annuities to the Sioux until they officially concede ownership of the Black Hills to the United States government. So even if you weren't fighting the battle, you were suffering from this Sioux victory. The U.S. government would also be more stingent with its operations in other reservations. So the Crow, who were allies with the U.S. in this battle, would also suffer hardships, restrictions to what they were allowed to get in the reservations and how they were able to move in and out of the reservations as a result of this battle. The U.S. got very strict on how the boundaries of the reservations and who was allowed in and who was allowed out at this point. Oh, we'll get to that. Ultimately, the victors of Battle of Little Bighorn, keep in mind, this was not a unified army. It wasn't an army that Custer attacked. It was a village that happened to have warriors living amongst it, the patriarchs of various families. So they went and defended themselves as a result. Don't get me mistaken, the Lakota Sioux warriors in particular are some of the most ferocious fighters you're going to hear about in North American history. So I'm not saying to these guys, oh, they were just peacefully living out there. They were hunting buffalo and they were pretty damn good at it for a reason. And that's why they were also pretty damn good at being able to move wherever they wanted to for many centuries in this part of North America. Because nobody wanted to mess around with the Lakota Sioux. I'm just saying. So what ends up happening is they kind of scatter. Different leaders, different clans go different directions after the Little Bighorn village is broken up, which again, natural. That's the natural course of this time. After they'd gathered for their hunting, for this part of the hunting season, they're going their separate ways. Sitting Bull in particular, he will decide instead of he'll continue to evade U.S. forces. He'll end up getting himself and some of his followers up into Canada, and they'll kind of live up there in exile, but ultimately Canada won't protect him. He can't find anybody to protect him up in that area, and he can't be left alone up there. So he makes a decision to come back into the United States, come back to these lands, and he will formally surrender to the United States in 1881 to live on this Great Sioux reservation for the rest of his life. Crazy Horse will surrender much earlier. He'll surrender in May of 1877. This is traditionally seen as the end of the Great Sioux War. There's a lot of fighting in the latter half of 1876. It's not on the scale of Little Bighorn. It's usually a part of a certain tribe, a certain leader making an ambush on a U.S. column, and then the U.S. column returns fire and drives them back. Casualties are incurred. However, these ambush tactics, where they used to be more effective in the past, they've kind of lost their muster by the latter half of 1876 because there's just so much military force in the Montana territory. So Crazy Horse decides to surrender. He will be killed later that year when he's in confinement on the reservation. And there's a whole other can of worms open up about that because in some ways it looks like it was an assassination. Now, I don't have a write-up. Sorry. I'll get to you, sir. Just McAllister. Thank you for tuning in. I'll get to you soon. I was another comment I want to answer first. Here it is. How was Reno not court-martialed for his actions during this battle? I can't see that Benteen did anything wrong. Again, I'll be honest, and since we're about to hit 2 hours, I didn't have time to really delve into the aftermath. What I know is that Reno never was he was not initially court-martialed. However, he had accusations of drunkenness, which were plaguing him even before the Little Bighorn campaign. His wife had died, sadly, in 1874. And I should have mentioned it earlier. That was partly why he was such a, like in terms, a moody person at this time. He was definitely still grieving. And then the stress of campaign, being far from home, you start drinking, it just starts a spiral effect. And this happens. Then he's very paranoid over his reputation. The United States was not originally going to had no interest in court-martialing him just because it was like, well, damage has been done. Custer died. Custer can kind of get the blame for all this. Okay, let's just, under the bridge. Reno demanded an inquiry, and he got it. He got a court of inquiry at his own request, and it absolved him of any wrongdoing. However, it clearly continued to eat at him, and there were portions of the American press, the American public, that greatly denounced Reno and saw him as the true culprit of what went wrong a Little Bighorn. And interestingly enough, when Reno dies, Marcus Reno would not be, he was initially buried somewhere else. He would be reinterred to Custer National Cemetery. He is now buried on the Little Bighorn battlefield. George Armstrong Custer was exhumed. His remains were exhumed in 1877, and he's now buried at West Point Cemetery. Interesting. Reno's the one who did not die a Little Bighorn, but he's the one that rests eternally there, not Custer. Just think that's very interesting. I don't know what that says about Reno. You say in the comments. That's another good. Yeah, and also, yeah, this was definitely a situation where the Lakota Sioux, the Cheyenne, the Arapaho, and other forces that were there, they knew where they were at. They were used to camping in the Little Bighorn Valley. So, yeah. Now, interestingly enough, there's a theory going around that a lot of people that this was a lot of people's. And for the record, the photo, the bones in there, those weren't human bones. They were horse bones on the battlefield, though. Not human remains, though. I did not show human remains on camera, but the bones. And it's a historical sense. This could be re-uploaded to the replay channel. It's fine at this point. So, what was I going to say? I was going to say something, Books, and I'm sorry. My brain just lost what I was going to talk about. So we're going to go talk about something else. That's why the Brits lost the Rev War in War of 1812 as a stalemate. Talking back to knowing the terrain. All right, let me get down. John McAllister. Okay, let me get back to your comment. Thank you for tuning in, John McAllister. Cheyenne in particular really think about this. Cheyenne suffered the most massacres than any other tribe. It was looked at as a war against the Cheyenne who took the Lakota, who the Lakota were aligned with. And that's a good point as well. The Cheyenne had suffered a lot of depredations. I would argue in some ways a bit more than the Lakota Sioux did in terms of the length and their interactions with the United States government and other forces before then. Because you remember, some of these Plains Indians, they also were interacting with Mexico. And before it was Mexico, they were interacting in elements of Spain going way back. So, hey, speaking of the Mexican War, somebody came down here. Speaking of the Mexican War, yeah, Mexican competence was horrible in Mexican-American War. Mexican-American War, story for another day. Home field advantage is always critical. Brits know this regarding the Afghanis. No one should fight in their home territory. Everyone has had their asses kicked in the Khyber Pass. Yeah, you don't want to go there. Don't go to Khyber Pass. Surrendered May 6th. My grandma's birthday, assassinated on September 5th. My other granny's birthday. Oof. Yeah, and several of these folks, yep, they are now interred who fought at Little Bighorn or fought in the Indian Wars or now buried at Arlington National Cemetery. Yeah, I didn't get into much detail about that. Actually, when they did the Tavern Talk with Dresden Gettysburg, they had to censor every time they were talking about, and they were trying to be vague on the details, but YouTube was still dinging them, so they had to censor, I think, even the word mutilation. So I'm not going to talk too much about it, but yeah, the bodies that were left on the Little Bighorn battlefield, they weren't just left there, and this isn't like the Civil War where they try to give them a proper Christian burial. No, the bodies were just left there. I'm going to talk about that briefly, what happened with most of the remains when we wrap up the stream. Yeah, now Matthew Brady wasn't involved at this point. I think Matthew Brady was retired from photography because his eyesight would have been destroyed by then. But, some of Alexander Gardner, of course, wasn't there, but actually, the reason I bring his name up, Alexander Gardner did have a long career photographing the Union Pacific Railroad being built and photographing a lot of these key native leaders as they were brought onto the reservation. So a lot of our early photographs of these key figures, they were by Alexander Gardner and his team, believe it or not. But I don't know. I don't think he actually photographed the Little Bighorn battlefield. So what ends up happening is to the Little Bighorn property, as my voice goes hoarse because I've been speaking for I did not realize the stream was going to go for 2 hours. It is almost 9 o'clock. This has been great. A few years after, well, first, by 1877, they're already set in military forces because they're still occupying the Montana territory. It's still an active war zone. Several of the fort garrisons, they'll go out and give these bodies a proper burial that were left. Most of the native dead were pulled off the battlefield. So what was left for the dead of the U.S. 7th Cavalry. And they'll be buried, a good portion, they'll be kind of buried where they fell. Some of them will be eventually relocated to Last Stand Hill. I think most of them bodies got reinterred to Last Stand Hill. I'm actually going to change my statement. There is a monument on top of the hill with all the names of those killed in the 7th U.S. Cavalry, including the Indian scouts that were killed at the Battle of Little Bighorn. But the government will continue ownership of the property. And not just in that, well, yeah, duh, read out that, they were making this into Indian reservations. No, I mean that this will become designated a national cemetery akin to how Gettysburg would get a national cemetery, which that allowed for the government to have the jurisdiction to continue maintenance of the burials, protection of the burials on this battlefield, and allowed for more burials. And it's worth mentioning, in that cemetery there that's on the Little Bighorn battlefield, you're looking at part of the battlefield. This is part of the ground that Custer and the Cheyenne and the Lakota Sioux were fighting over, and the Dakota were fighting over on June 25th, 150 years ago. It is now a cemetery. Basically, everybody you see in there, with the exception of a few, most of them are not actually, I don't think, dead from the battle, but are dead from future fights in other Indian wars. And then they relocated older dead to this cemetery later on for convenience. And then today, there's over 5,000 people interred at Custer National Cemetery. I think they ceased burials in 1978. So when you go visit the Little Bighorn battlefield, it's a massive national cemetery as well, all the way out in Montana. They dug shallow graves where they fell. If they were identifiable, they wrote the name on a sliver of paper, rolled it up and stuffed in an empty cartridge case, and hammered the cartridge in pieces of teepee poles that had been left in the valley by the Indians. They left behind many teepee poles frames. Yeah, it's fine. And that's an interesting, I did not know about that, how they ID'd the bodies originally. Yeah, but 5,000 veterans are now interred there, not just from the Indian Wars, of course, since other conflicts have happened, but that's where it starts. And it's a little eerie to think, though, the United States were burying dead from future Indian wars on the Little Bighorn battlefield. I don't think I have to make much more of a statement than to explain how much this battle has lived rent-free in the minds of the United States of America. When I say the United States, I'm not just talking about the federal government. I'm not just talking about American citizens who've heard these stories about this war on the very fringes of the frontier. I am also including these native reservations, because whether it's liked or not, those native tribes are part of our country's shared history today. They are part of our country. At least I view it that way. I know it was not done peacefully, and I know that they want more independence, but I also do recognize that their stories are tied into the greater national fabric that we all share. In Pennsylvania, we're on a Crow reservation at the end of the day. That's just my 2 cents on it. I'm trying to play the nice guy here after speaking for 2 hours about horrible warfare and people killing each other for land. Some of the Indian scouts, by the way, as well, of Custer that survived that day, they're actually also interred here at the National Cemetery. Now, initially, this was called the Custer National Cemetery. The cemetery itself is still referred to as that, but they initially just called the whole battlefield unit as such. Then, of course, it's gained mythical status, Custer's Last Stand, and everybody knows the story, or think they know the story of Custer's demise. Everybody has said everything that could be said and more about Custer, Benteen, and Reno's actions that day. But for many years, nobody was talking about what this battle really was. The Battle of the Greasy Grass, the Great Plains Indian victory over the 7th U.S. Cavalry, and a very important lesson in leadership gone wrong in military operations. This is a case study, at least when you look for the U.S. 7th Cavalry, how not to operate in this type of situation. Not saying everything that Custer did was terrible, just we can all admit things went wrong. Why? Well, Custer died. So, but it should be important to remember this was a great victory for the Lakota Sioux and for the Cheyenne and the Arapaho. And it really, proves that even in the 1870s, these weren't just groups of people that were inferior because their cultures were different from the United States of America. This proved that they are equals to any other person claiming to be an American citizen if they were able to dispatch one of these supposedly best operated cavalry units in late 19th century America. So they renamed the property eventually from Custer's battlefield. It became the Little Bighorn National Monument to include both sides. And in the early 2000s, they got a Indian memorial established. That's what's in the top image. A large, and you're only seeing a part of it. It's this big, like almost amphitheater structure that you walk into, and has the history of all the tribes that participate in the battle to kind of be on equal footing to the monument that's on top of Last Stand Hill. And Little Bighorn Battlefield is very noteworthy. It's one of the very few preserved battlefields that you can go and explore, and you will see just about every spot where a soldier fell marked. We're used to seeing regiment monuments at places like Gettysburg and Antietam. And sometimes you see a monument to an officer or a particular individual that was paid for private funding. Just about every member of the 7th U.S. Cavalry, where they fell, there is a small headstone or a cenotaph, I should say. They're not buried there, but it does mark where eyewitnesses claim these folks fell. And they have, and I think they're still doing it. In the early 2000s, they started to also add these more brown cenotaphs, marking based on oral histories where some of the Indian warriors fell as well on the battlefield. So it's very weird to see that, but very fascinating at the same time. And it really makes this more than just a very beautiful landscape. When you see these photos, just these stones just marking where somebody fell, it really drives home. You're on a battlefield, and I don't know, there's something about Little Bighorn, just the photos. I've not been there in person, but the photos alone. I've been to Gettysburg, I've been to Antietam, I've been to Brandywine, I've been to Newmarket, I've been to Fort Meigs, I've floated around kind of where the Battle Lake Erie occurred. Been to many battlefields, I'm saying. There's nothing I've seen that can compare to this, with the exception of maybe Esan the Wanda in Africa, which, interesting tie-in. Both have a very similar story of you have these two military units that believe that they're just going to be able to mop up these hostiles, cross over a mountain range, and then quickly realize they've walked into a hornet's nest and are completely annihilated. I'd like to thank everybody for tuning in to tonight's edition of Uncut History. Now, before we wrap up tonight, you probably noticed in the chat, we have an odd poll. You probably were expecting I was going to have a fun little poll relating to the battle. I do not. What I do have is a series that we're doing here, a recurrent series in a live stream started by you, the viewers, namely Michael Archangel and Fu Man Blue, who are both absent tonight. Every time I do one of these, and they keep saying, Rita, you got to do another presidential throwdown. They're nowhere to be found. They keep missing out on the votes. Well, they started, but I'm going to let you guys vote tonight. We have tonight a poll. We're trying to do, because it's the 250th of American history, of the United States of America. Sorry, guys, I am hoarse in the voice. Since it's the 250th of the United States Declaration of Independence of Great Britain, viewers have recommended we do a presidential bracket and decide who is the greatest president of them all. And this will totally have no ill political impact on this channel. So I've set a bracket up and we're going for the first rounds. We've gone pretty far right now. Right now, our current battle between presidents is between Grover Cleveland and Benjamin Harrison. So Cleveland being one of only two presidents to have non-consecutive terms in office. And in between those non-consecutive terms was Benjamin Harrison. Cleveland, Democrat for 2 terms, non-consecutive, and then Harrison, 1 term as a Republican. Please vote to see who will advance to the next round. So this is just first round action, but this is the battle. I'm very curious to see where this one goes. I mean, I guess if people reelected Cleveland and replaced Harrison, I guess that kind of speaks for what the American people thought of Harrison. Oh, I'm burping too. Apologize. I've fallen apart. And if you enjoyed tonight's stream and you're like, wow, I did not know this cool stuff about the Battle of Little Bighorn. I want to learn more about American history, especially the forgotten pieces. Or this guy is completely an idiot, but he is an hilarious idiot. Regardless of the case, first consider hitting the like button down below. Let's the TubeU algorithm know you do want to be edumericated with historical content like this. And if you want to go the extra mile support, or no, I did it wrong. I know, Editor Chan. I messed up my shill again. I don't know why I'm failing at shilling. I'm terrible at trying to ask for subscribers and money. I'm terrible at it. If you want to follow us on our future ventures, consider subscribing here to the channel to Read Out Productions. We don't do live streams regularly. I do them when I have free time to do the research because they can be, well, you can see we're 2 hours in. They can be quite exhausting of experiences. They're fun, but they're very intensive for me. But if you enjoy these infrequent live streams and you want to watch us on our weekly uploads, every Saturday at 5 p.m., a new video comes out where we go off to explore a new aspect of America's history that's most likely been forgotten. Then be sure to subscribe here to Read Out Productions. And if you want to go the extra mile and supporting us, keeping us on the road, keeping me caffeinated, especially for these long nights and early mornings when I do research for projects like this, you can donate to Read Out Productions through our Ko-fi page. Link is in the description below. And I love you recontextualizing history that has been misrepresented for a long time. Well, I don't know if I'm recontextualizing, because I'm not trying to reshape the history. I'm just trying to kind of turn if this is the light that the public has on a certain historical topic. I just like doing this. Hey, look over here. Washington's first and early military surrender. Let's talk about the guy who actually accepted his surrender. I'm just that kind of guy. That's why this video is like, the more I kept researching, I'm like, you know what? I already talked about Custer's Last Stand, but you know what? I'm going to put a lot of light on Reno and Benteen's defense because nobody talks about that. And that's like that's over half the actual battle in terms of the time that happened. But thank you for the kind comment regardless. And I'm glad you enjoyed tonight's stream. And there was a couple other comments I know some people were making as we wind down for tonight. And Dogface made it. He said he wasn't going to make it today. Now, do me a favor, Dogface. If you watch just from the replay, go 10 minutes in, skip the first 10 minutes. Just trust me. You don't know what the first 10 minutes, that wasn't the actual stream. So actually, we've only been streaming for 2 hours and 7 minutes, not 2 hours and 17 minutes. Those that know will know. Do you think that Custer died up on the hill or down by the river? That's a very good question. I can't answer at this time. I would need to do more research on precisely where his body was. I know that they have his centograph in like the fenced off area on the Custer's Last Stand hill, but I know there's a lot of new information now coming down that, hey, we're finding evidence there was fighting all the way down to the river. I don't know if he tried to, it would make sense if he tried to, but see, I'm curious. I think at least if you go by White Cow Bull's report, it seems to imply that Custer died pretty early in his phase of the attack, or at least he was felled off his horse pretty early in the attack. Is it true or not? I can't say. So that's a good question. I just don't feel confident I can answer that this time. I think it's one of two, because I think East San Luanda does something pretty similar. But they don't have like centographs. There's a lot of cairns, stone cairns instead. So this one actually has the names. Little Bighorn has the names, where I think East San Luanda is just stone cairns. This reminds me of Japan after Pearl Harbor. Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto following the Pearl Harbor attack, I fear all we have done is awaken a sleeping giant and fill him with a terrible resolve. Yeah, there are some ways like that. See if I missed anything else. Alrighty, well, let's go see what's the result of our presidential throwdown. We will end this round in 5, 4, 3, 2, get your vote in, 1, and it's done. And we have Grover Cleveland. Grover Cleveland has defeated Benjamin Harrison. Congratulations, Grover Cleveland. I think he was hit once in the river, which is why they stopped at the river. I don't think he died at the river. He died on the hill. I think his brother shot him in the head. That's possible. I'm leaning toward he died on the hill. That's just because I think they found his remains. There's accounts finding his remains up on the hill. Different natives after they were going up there and doing things to the human bodies up there afterwards. So I think Custer ended up expiring on the hill, but I don't know how hurt he was, if that makes sense. Was he just been knocked off a horse in the river, or was he sincerely gravely wounded? I've heard some say that the headshot was not, some believe that the shot to his head was not a self-inflicted wound, but it was just a stray bullet after he'd killed, because there's just so much happening up there. And again, it's one of them at that point, nobody's going to know. And at the end of the day, all that matters is that tragically, out of this whole situation, at least 260 members of the 7th U.S. Cavalry died, and an untold amount of people from these different tribes died on this horrible day, June 25th, 1876. That's an maybe he was already dead and they dragged him up there. There's accounts of that, and even White Bull's account that we read ended with him describing that there was a guy that we cornered, we thought he was going to shoot him, and then he just turned the gun on himself. And that's part of the other thing I think why Little Bighorn lives in the subconscious of so many Americans, even those that don't know anything about the plain Indian cultures, don't know anything about these wars that happen out west, don't know about the reservation system, don't know much about Custer, don't know much about military history in general. This battle lives rent free, just because when you really start reading into the accounts, it is brutal. There was no escape. Yeah, this wasn't there was no escape. This isn't like a Civil War battle where, well, you fall into prisoner hands or something. You throw up your hands and surrender. That wasn't an option. The United States government had done so much wrong. The people in Washington, D.C. had wronged the people of the plains for so long that whoever came out to try to enforce the will of the federal government was going to pay the ultimate price. And it just happened to be the 7th U.S. Cavalry. Did we get sunshine and lollipops? And we need sunshine and lollipops after this. This stream took a dark turn. I'm getting like dark, like, oh, that's that perfect history, not that one. Oh, here it is. One thing I wish for the future is that they do invent time travel to be able to properly document what happened at these places 100% every time. I mean, there's like the whole, like, in a hypothetical situation, if I go back in time and not contract any of the horrible illnesses, not be shot by any of these bullets, and just be like a fly in the wall type deal. I mean, yeah, I'd like to do that just to see what was really happening. But on the other hand, that's probably best we don't go back. That's just me personally. It's probably best that we don't go back and meet our past selves. That's just me personally. We just keep moving forward. We learn from the mistakes in the past and just move forward. That's just me personally, though. But in a hypothetical sense, it would be nice to just have one dinner with Dan the Man Sickles. It would be entertaining, would it not? Alrighty. I think I've caught up with everybody. We've wrapped up our thing, or wrapped up. We've wrapped up our thing. 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 We've wrapped up wrapped up our stream at almost 2.5 hours. The last of the brain cells are fried. I think I've overstayed my welcome tonight, but thank you guys staying for the whole end. I hope you enjoyed the stream. Oh, a couple more things before we wrap up tonight. I promise we're going to wrap up the stream. I promise I'll stop talking here soon. If I can. So, the first thing I wanted to mention is during tonight's stream, we have officially crossed over 5,000 subscribers for Readout Productions, which I'm not going to lie, when I started making these history videos, the channel itself has been around for a decade, but it went by a couple different names. I started getting serious about doing history videos around 2019, 2020, 2021. It's hard to say. My channel. I didn't set this thing up with like a set game plan like I do. I think some other people have, which I envy those that have a game plan on how I'm going to start the channel out like this. I'm going to package it like this. I'm going to market it like that. I know my stick. I am in awe if you're able to do that. I can't do that. I'm not the best. As you've learned, I'm not the best of planners. I have a plan and then it falls apart really quickly and I have to reconstruct it on the fly. So this channel is kind of organically evolved starting in the late 2010s into the 2020s. So it always been my goal, though. I'd want to hit 5,000 subscribers. So we did that tonight. So now don't take that subscription away. Let me have that for a few days. Just a few days. Right, Starfair, you'll allow me to have this for like 48 hours, right? Yes, good man. But I greatly appreciate all 5,000 subscribers. Hopefully we're able to keep growing this channel in the years to come. I also want to mention next Saturday, the plan is we will have our annual 4th of July stream. So it won't be on a Thursday. It'll be on a Saturday because 4th of July is on a Saturday. And I always do a stream on 4th of July. I think this will be the 4th consecutive year I've done a stream. I have to. It's a 250th. I really don't know what that stream is going to look like. I'm trying to either get a few people to join me in person to do like a panel type stream where we'll just kind of, shoot the crap for the next 2 hours with you guys. Or if that can't work out, I'll see if I could try to get a few people to join like a virtual panel. And again, we'll shoot the crap. Or all else fails, it'll be me. We have tier lists. There's a Young Washington movie coming out July 3rd, which looks like absolute crap. Especially if I said I am not an expert on the Great Sioux War of 1876. Do you know what I am very passionate about in researching? The French and Indian War in Western Pennsylvania. Methinks this Young Washington may be my Napoleon. So maybe we'll just spend the whole evening ranting about the movie. I don't know what it'll look like, but there will be a July 4th stream. It'll be next Saturday, July 4th, probably evening. I don't have a date yet. So keep an eye out for the community post, for the Facebook, for Twitter. When I post, I'll tell you later on what the date really is. So we got more comments going. Or just keep rolling. Yeah, we got more comments going. Woot, woot. Yep. Thank you for tuning in, Books and Battlefield. Woot, woot. Star Fury, well done, mate. 5K subscribers. You deserve more for your great content. Well, I appreciate the kind remarks. And Josh McAllister, first time coming across channel, subscribe though. I missed out on your stream. Well, I mean, we've been here for like 2 hours. You've been there about an hour, so you got like half of it. So, you didn't miss out most of it. And again, you can go back and replay it. Just don't watch the first 10 minutes because I'm ranting about a software. There's nothing historical related. Poor Ken. Ken was here and then Ken ran away because I started ranting about the software. Poor Ken. He ran off. He's telling up 6 questions lengths about, man, read out. He got this weird issue with this StreamYards. I thought it was a history channel, man. Damn you Americans, us Brits will return and get our tea back. That'll be the day. I'm an expert on both. How dare you treat that tea so badly, you heathens? Yeah. Well, before we start a new Boston Tea Party in the comment section, it is time for me to hit the sack. Got a busy day tomorrow. New episode of Retracing History, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time this Saturday. Thank you guys for tuning in. And until next time.
Farewell and adieu to you fair Spanish ladies. Farewell and adieu